Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take these, massive stacks of source material, really dense academic work, and we just distill the most profound knowledge directly for you. We're basically giving you a high-fidelity shortcut to becoming thoroughly well-informed.
And today, we're on a pretty unique mission. We're stepping away from current events or market analysis. We're engaging directly with the bedrock of classical Islamic jurisprudence. It's called fiqh.
So we're really getting into the deep mechanics of religious law and textual analysis, looking at the methodology scholars use to extract rulings from revelation itself.
Exactly. And our source text for this is a cornerstone of the field. It's a rigorous legal analysis by the scholar Abu Bakr Ahmad ibn Ali al-Razi.
And this isn't just a list of rulings, is it? It's more like a guide to the rules themselves.
That's the crucial distinction. Al-Razi doesn't just tell us what the ruling is. His introduction first establishes the primacy of Ta'ad, the absolute oneness of God, as the governing principle for everything that follows.
So methodology and theology come first.
They have to. He insists on it. It shows that the integrity of the process is, just as vital as the final answer you get.
And the concepts he chooses for this deep scrutiny are maybe the most universally recited, but also the most debated phrases in the entire tradition.
The Basmala, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, and Surat al-Fatiha, they are the absolute keys to daily worship, and we are going to explore all the arguments that define their status.
Right.
Our mission today is drawn right from the source to provide a professional, optimum, and academic deep dive into all the complex dimensions of these phrases. We're looking at 9 critical angles on the Basmala alone.
9.
From linguistic possibility to its legal status in prayer, and then we'll move to the structure and validity of Atatiyas. It's a real intellectual feast.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning then, the fundamental structure of the Basmala itself.
So when you look at the Arabic phrase Bismillah, in the name of Allah, it starts with the letter Bi. The B sound.
Right.
That letter functions as a preposition. And in classical Arabic, a preposition is a particle that's syntactically dependent. It can't just start a coherent sentence by itself.
Wait, so the key isn't what's written, but the grammatical necessity of what's implied. The sentence needs a missing piece to work.
Precisely. To complete the sentence and make it functional, that preposition, the ba, it has to be attached to an implicit verbal pronoun. If you don't assume a verb is there, the statement is just incoherent.
Like saying to the store in English.
Exactly. Everyone knows you mean I am going to the store, but that verb going is essential for the meaning to even exist, even if you don't say it out loud.
And that immediately opens up a path for dual interpretation, doesn't it? If the verb is implicit, the source material argues for 2 primary linguistically valid possibilities.
That's right. The first possibility is that the implicit verb is what's called a declarative statement, or khabar. This interpretation gives you the meaning. I begin in the name of Allah. The verb begin is left out because the act itself, whether you're reciting or writing or eating, it's observable. Your action already shows the meaning.
So the statement just reflects what's already happening.
Right. And the second possibility, this one completely shifts the dynamic. It goes from being a personal declaration to a divine obligation. It becomes a command, an amr.
So the meaning becomes begin in the name of Allah.
Correct. Begin in the name of Allah, or say in the name of Allah. And the text confirms that the Quran itself provides a really clear precedent for this kind of implicit imperative structure.
And that precedent is in the verse, Sirius Yetting, you alone we worship.
Absolutely. The theological understanding of that verse is that we are commanded to say it. So it implicitly means, say, you alone we worship.
I see.
And this connects directly to the very explicit command given to the prophet when he first received revelation. So yunkorjasa, read in the name of your Lord. That explicit command establishes the foundational rule. Initiation, especially of a sanctified act, has to follow a divine imperative.
Okay, but this is where the philosophical and legal tightrope walk really begins. If we accept both meanings, a declarative statement about my action and an imperative command from God, we run into a technical objection, the one about literal versus metaphorical language.
Yes, the classic objection from the school of thought that insists on, strict linguistic purity. If a verb were explicitly stated, critics argued that a single expression couldn't serve 2 conflicting modes of meaning at the same time.
Because one is literal, okuika, and the other is metaphorical, mojaz. It would create ambiguity in the law.
A very valid concern, especially when you're dealing with a text meant to establish firm law. But al-Razi's response to this is, well, it's elegant. It hinges entirely on the fact that the verb is not explicit. Precisely. Since the verb is only implied, it's broad enough to accommodate both meanings without contradiction. The meaning becomes a composite, a richer dual fulfillment.
So it's both. I begin in the name of Allah, reflecting my action. And you also begin in the name of Allah, fulfilling the command.
You've got it. If the verb was written in the text, it would have to be one or the other. But because it's a necessary addition made by the speaker, we can load it with both legal intentions. This is very high-level legal maneuvering.
It really is.
And the source provides a fantastic analogy to cement this principle. It's from a famous prophetic hadith about error and forgetfulness.
The one that says the community has been absolved of mistakes, forgetfulness, and acts under compulsion.
That's the one. You are a John does is so a world no say. Now that statement itself has an implicit ambiguity, doesn't it?
It does. When it says absolved, what does that actually mean?
Exactly. The implicit reference could mean the removal of legal accountability. So the ruling is lifted, no compensation is due. Or it could mean the removal of the sin, but the legal ruling, like compensating for damages, still remains.
Both seem linguistically possible. So how do you decide which one is intended?
You have to look at external evidence. The sources show that if other evidence clarifies that both consequences are intended, removing the sin and the accountability, then the dual meaning holds. If evidence limits it to one, then only that one applies.
The key is just proving that ambiguity in an implied meaning is permissible.
As long as context eventually determines the final legal application, yes.
Which leads us directly to the exception. When can these dual meanings not coexist? Because there must be times when legal ambiguity just can't be tolerated.
Correct. This conflict happens when intending one meaning fundamentally negates the practical outcome of the other. The text gives the example of the naya, or intention hadith.
Actions are only by intentions.
Let's break down the implicit meanings there. Okay, so if the implicit meaning is about the validity, jawaz, of the act, then if you omit the intention, the act is legally void. It never happened.
Right.
But if the implicit meaning is about the superiority or perfection of the act, then omitting the intention just results in a valid but, deficient ruling.
You can't have both at the same time. One says the act is void, the other says it's just flawed.
Exactly. You can't simultaneously intend the negation of the essence of the ruling and the negation of its perfection. They're mutually exclusive legal outcomes. This is why jurists have to be able to dissect linguistic possibility first.
So now that we've established the imperative part of the basmala, the command to begin, we need to apply it. Where is it obligatory and where is it just recommended?
Yes, the command divides into the obligatory, or fart, and the recommended, nafila.
Okay.
Al-Razi extracts two very clear instances where mentioning God's name is legally obligatory. The first is in the opening of the prayer.
And he's citing verses from Surat al-Ala for this.
Yes, verses 14 and 15. The crucial observation here is the sequence. The text says someone mentions the name of his Lord and is then immediately followed by and praise.
Ah, that specific placement is interpreted as the opening takbir, the Allahu Akbar.
Or the immediate start of the recitation. It's a mandatory invocation to initiate the prayer.
And the second obligatory mention, that one is much more straightforward.
It is. It's in the context of Dabiya ritual slaughtering. That's based on the explicit prohibition in the Quran. Do not eat from that over which the name of God has not been mentioned.
So omitting the name of Allah there makes the meat unlawful, a direct, undeniable legal consequence.
Absolutely. All other uses then fall under the recommended or commended category, nafil.
Things like purification, eating, drinking, starting a journey.
Exactly. But the discussion of recommended mentions immediately brings up a critical objection about ablution, or washed.
Right, there's that famous hadith. Oyus jet, Kesiatali wants to see. There is no ablution for the one who does not mention the name of Allah over it.
Now, for you listening, the literal meaning of no ablution suggests the whole thing is invalid if you forget the basmala. How do jurists reconcile this very strong statement with the ruling that it's only recommended?
This is a perfect example of that principle of harmonization we talked about. The juristic response, especially in the Hanafi school, is essential here. They interpret that hadith as the negation of perfection or virtue, not the negation of validity.
So it means the ablution is deficient in spiritual reward, but it's still legally valid as a purification.
Precisely. They argue that if you took this one hadith literally, it would contradict or abrogate other strong evidence and the general consensus on the ease of purification. So the stronger principle that solitary reports can't overturn a general well-established practice is applied.
So they consistently lean toward interpreting negation as being about completeness, not validity. Whenever external evidence supports it, yes. It ensures the law remains cohesive and, easy for people to follow. It's an intellectual priority given to legal certainty.
Okay, we've established the grammatical structure and the legal command. Now, let's move to its place within the physical text of the Quran itself. First question, simple one. Is the basmalah even part of the Quran at all?
On this point, there is absolutely no disagreement. Universal, definitive consensus. The full basmalah is undeniably part of the Quran.
And the proof is explicit.
It is. From Surah Al-Naml, verse 30. Close sud epaid in Waedis Kanaich. It's in a fil. It is from Solomon, and it is. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate. Because it's embedded right there in a verse, its status as revealed text is non-negotiable.
But the source material shows it wasn't a static phrase. It actually evolved during the early period of revelation, which is vital for understanding why debates came up later.
Yes, there was a clear, documented evolution. Initially, the prophet would write Bismika Allahumma, in your name, O Allah. Then, after a revelation in Surat Hud, which mentions Bismillah, in the name of Allah, the phrase was shortened to that.
And then it expanded again to include Al-Rahman.
That's right. When the Quran commanded, Qalidu Allah al-Rahma, say, call upon Allah or call upon the most merciful, the name Al-Rahman was added.
But it was only after the story of Prophet Solomon in Surat Al-Nama that the full four-part basmalah was definitively established.
Exactly. It shows this gradual, divinely guided consolidation of the phrase.
And to bring this historical evolution to life, we have to talk about the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. That anecdote really reinforces the timeline.
It's a fantastic anecdote for showing the real-world impact of revelation. During the treaty negotiations, the Prophet commanded Ali to begin writing with the full basmalah, but Suhail ibn Amr, the representative of the Quraysh, immediately objected.
He said, we do not recognize Allah.
Right. He insisted on the old format, Bismika Aloma. And the implication of that opposition is huge.
It demonstrates that at that specific moment, the full basmalah wasn't yet established as a universally accepted, non-negotiable Quranic phrase for everyone.
Its unchallengeable status was secured later, specifically by its inclusion in Surah Al-Naml. The historical account serves as chronological proof.
Okay, now here's where the deeper textual analysis begins. The phrase is Quran, but is it a complete verse? If you look back at Surah Al-Naml, it's clearly not.
No, in Surah Al-Naml, the basmalah is definitively only part of a verse. It follows the intro phrase, Innahu min Sulaiman. However, the source clarifies that a phrase's status can shift based on its context and placement.
So a component that is only half a verse in one place can be a full verse somewhere else.
Exactly. For example, the phrase Al-Rahman Al-Ram is a complete verse, the third verse in Al-Fatiha, but it's only the latter part of the basmalah itself. The text states that narrations from authoritative companions like Salama and Ali bin Abi Talib show they counted the basmalah as a complete independent verse when it stood alone. They sometimes called it an ayhala, a separating verse.
So it can be a verse. Which brings us to the core disagreement, the ikhtilaf. Is it part of Al-Fatiha or other surahs? This is the legal flashpoint that affects prayer all over the world.
This is the definitive legal dividing line. The debate started with the early reciters. The reciters of Kufa counted it as the first verse of Al-Fatiha. The reciters of Bala and the early scholars of Medina did not.
And the practice of the Emmi school, not reciting it out loud in prayer, that's an indicator of their legal position, right? That it's not part of the surah.
It is. And this stands in direct contrast to the view attributed to Imam al-Shafi, who held that it is a verse of every surah and so its recitation is obligatory.
But al-Razi notes that this disagreement was historically limited just to Al-Fatiha.
Yes, the broader view that it belongs to every surah was not the early consensus. The sources then pivot to the decisive evidence against its inclusion in Al-Fatiha, which comes from the profound hadith of the division of prayer.
This hadith is the central pillar of the non-inclusion argument. How does it work?
It's a hadith qudsi, so the words are from Allah, narrated by the Prophet. It describes how Allah divides the prayer meaning al-Fatiha into two equal halves between himself and the worshipper. And the division begins with Odiye itnair tuyesi at the kul. All praise is for Allah, Lord of the worlds.
If the basmala were truly the first verse, the divine division would logically have to start there. But it doesn't.
That is reason one for its exclusion. But reason two is even more compelling from a juristic perspective. The entire concept is built around nisfain, two equal halves. The first part is pure praise of Allah. The second contains the servant's petition. If you include the basmala, which is entirely pure praise, you invalidate that structure. You make the first half too heavy, destroying the balance described in the divine communication.
The integrity of the division itself proves the basmala must be structurally external to those 7 verses.
It does. So if it's Qur'an, but not an integral part of the surahs, what is its definitive legal function?
Separation.
Its primary function is separation, and this is proven definitively by the compilation of the physical Quran, the Mushaf, during the time of the third Caliph Uthman.
Right, when he was arranging Surat al-Anfal and Surat al-Bariya or al-Tawbah.
Yes, he made a critical, deliberate choice. He omitted the basmala between them.
Why?
Because their themes were so similar, he presumed they might have originally been one long, continuous surah. He didn't want to insert a separator where one might not have been intended by the Prophet.
That decision serves as definitive legal proof. If the basmala was an integral verse of either surah, omitting it would have been unthinkable, an unconscionable act.
Exactly. The fact that he omitted it based on a structural uncertainty confirms its role is external, transitional, and purely for separation.
This brings us to a crucial methodological principle al-Razi emphasizes: verification through mass transmission, or tawatur.
This is the principle that determines legal certainty of the text itself. For you listening, tawatur means a piece of information has been transmitted by so many people through so many independent chains that it's mathematically and logically impossible they all conspired to lie or made the same mistake.
So it results in absolute certainty.
Absolute certainty. And the placement and counting of verses in the Quran are matters of tawatur. They must be known only through this universal mass transmission.
So what does applying this principle tell us about the basmala's status?
Since tawatur does not exist to confirm the basmala is part of al-Fatiha or the other surahs, its inclusion can't be legally affirmed, even if it's written in the Mushaf right at the beginning. The legal certainty required to establish it as a verse just isn't there.
The sources also use Surat al-Mulk as an example.
Yes. The Prophet stated that Surat al-Mulk has 30 verses. Scholars universally agree this count excludes the basmala. If you counted the basmala, the total would be 31, which would directly contradict the Prophet's explicit statement.
The same logic applies to the really short surahs, too.
Right. Al-Kawthar has 3 verses, Al-Ikhlas has 4. The established count never includes the basmala.
So, after all this rigorous analysis, the juristic conclusion is definitive. The basmala is Qur'an. It can be a complete verse on its own, but it's written at the beginnings of surahs solely for separation and blessing, not because it's an integral part of them.
And the certainty provided by tawatur overrides even strong, solitary reports that might suggest otherwise.
Okay, we've established its linguistic nature and its place in the Quran. Now we have to transition to the practical legal consequence, how it should be recited in prayer in alaf.
There's general agreement on the sequence. It's recited after seeking refuge, the istiadha, and before al-Fatiha. The disagreements are about frequency and, most critically, audibility.
Let's start with frequency. Even within the Hanafi school, there was a debate.
A nuanced debate, yes. Between the major students of Abu Hanifa, Abu Yusuf held that the basmala should be recited once in every rak'ah at the start of al-Fatiha.
But not repeated before the next surah.
Correct. But the other student, Muhammad, argued for even less frequency.
He said once in the first rak'ah was enough for the entire prayer.
Yes, though repeating it was permissible. And that view is based on a unique theological perspective of what prayer represents.
That it's not a series of disconnected units, but one single, continuous, sanctified act.
Exactly. It's conceptually like a single book. You only need to write the basmala once at the very beginning to sanctify the entire volume. One initiation suffices for the whole act of worship.
And when we contrast this internal debate, we see the wider spectrum of opinions between the Maliki and Shafi schools.
Right. The Shafi position since they see the basmala as the first verse of every surah, means it has to be recited. Malik ibn Anas, on the complete opposite end, argued it shouldn't be recited at all in obligatory prayers. Not silently, not aloud.
The legal landscape is clearly fragmented here, which demands a deep look at the evidence for audibility.
This is the ultimate test. Audible jar versus silent ikfar recitation. And this only applies to the imam during audible prayers like Fajr, Maghrib, and Isha.
Al-Shafi favored audible recitation. Abu Hanifa and the majority of the early generation strongly favored silent recitation.
And the sources show that the evidence for silent recitation is exceptionally weighty. It's derived from the consistent, unified practice of the most authoritative companions.
The Prophet himself, and then the first three Caliph Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman.
Reports confirm they all consistently recited the basmala silently in obligatory prayers. And further reports indicate that Ali, the fourth caliph, also maintained this silent practice.
Now, for you listening who might not be familiar with the hierarchy of legal evidence, why does the unified practice of these four figures carry such immense legal weight, enough to outweigh a strong, solitary report?
That's a critical question. The consensus of the four caliphs, the Rashidun, represents the earliest and most direct manifestation of the Prophet's teaching after his death. Their practice was witnessed by thousands. It was continuous.
So when reports about the Prophet's own acts might conflict, their unified public practice serves as a clarifying agent.
It leads to what's called the preferability principle. When reports conflict, the one that aligns with the manifest, continuous practice of the earliest Salaf is preferred. It offers a higher degree of historical certainty.
This is why some scholars called audible recitation an innovation.
Yes, because it contradicted the manifest public practice.
And the second decisive argument against audible recitation brings us back to tawatur.
Precisely. The gold standard of certainty. If audible recitation was an established mandatory part of the law, if it was meant to be heard by everyone, it would have been transmitted with the same force and certainty as the rest of al-Fatiha. It would be mutawat.
The fact that there are arguments about it at all means the transmission failed the tawatur test.
Correct. The absence of mutawatir transmission proves it wasn't the mandatory public practice. Silence, on the other hand, is much easier to practice consistently without conflict.
But we have to address a report about Muawiyah, which is often used as evidence for audible recitation.
Right, the story where he visited Medina and omitted the basmala and the takbir in prayer, and the congregation criticized him, saying he had stolen the prayer.
Proponents use this to say the basmala must have been audible for its omission to be noticed.
But al-Razi's analysis dismantles that interpretation. First, he points out the primary transmitters, the four caliphs, were far more authoritative. Second, the report itself is odd or solitary, which is not enough to overturn the established practice.
And third, the report only criticizes the omission of recitation entirely. It doesn't explicitly mandate audible recitation.
Exactly. It's a criticism of negligence, not a legal mandate for Yar.
So the legal conclusion is that silent recitation is overwhelmingly preferred. This reinforces the view that the basmala is recited for initiation and blessing, which can be achieved silently.
It's not seen as an integral, audibly mandatory verse of al-Fatiha.
Okay, so having concluded the complex status of the basmala, we now have to shift focus to the legal status of Surat al-Fatiha itself. This is maybe the most significant legal dispute concerning prayer.
It is. Let's start with the position from al-Razi's school, the Hanafi position, on the validity of a prayer without al-Fatiha. The Hanafi school maintains that while reciting al-Fatiha and another surah is the standard preferred practice, if someone forgets al-Fatiha but recites something else from the Quran, their prayer is improper, but critically it is valid and sufficient.
And this is a major separation from Malik and al-Shafi, who said omitting it negates the prayer entirely. You have to repeat it.
It is. The foundational evidence that allows the Hanafi school to validate a prayer without it is the generality of the Quran itself. Specifically, the verse explain, then decide whatever is easy from the Quran. The command is general, unqualified.
Absolutely. The phrasing, whatever is easy, implies choice. To then restrict that choice only to al-Fatiha would be seen as abrogating or nullifying the general allowance given in that clear Quranic verse.
So the burden of proof is on those who want to restrict that general rule.
And the prophetic evidence also leans toward generality. The famous hadith of teaching the prayer where the Prophet corrected a man's prayer. He told him to recite whatever is easy from the Quran,
with no explicit restriction of Fatiha in that teaching moment. The ruling is therefore based on the generality of the Quran first.
But this has to be countered by that very powerful hadith. Any prayer in which Surah al-Fatiha is not recited is kidaj. This is the main ammunition for those who say the prayer is invalid.
It is, and this is where the crucial, nuanced linguistic analysis of the term kidaj provides the decisive insight.
This term is key.
Al-Razi goes deep into its root meaning. Kidaj linguistically means deficient, incomplete, or spoiled. He uses this powerful analogy from pre-Islamic Arabic usage. A camel that miscarries is described as akdajat.
Deficient in its delivery, a premature delivery.
Right, and the implication of that analogy is profound. A miscarriage or deficiency presupposes that a conception and original existence had already occurred.
A camel that never conceived is never described as having miscarried.
Exactly. Therefore, deficiency, kidaj, presupposes an original existence or validity.
So the juristic logic follows. If the prayer were totally invalid, it would be called bul, or null, not just kidaj, deficient. A nullified act never existed legally. A deficient act existed, but it lacked perfection.
Precisely. The legal conclusion is that a prayer without al-Fatiha is valid but deficient. And this is supported by another hadith that says a man may pray but only half or a third or a tenth of his prayer is written for him. Partial reward is granted, which proves partial validity.
This seems to solve the conflict through just meticulous definition.
It does. The final legal synthesis acts as a harmonization principle. It reaffirms that solitary reports, no matter how strong they seem, cannot abrogate a clear general Quranic command.
Recite whatever is easy.
So the narration stating no prayer except with al-Fatiha must be interpreted as negation of perfection, not negation of validity.
So for you listening, this means al-Fatiha is absolutely essential for the prayer to be complete and earn its full reward. But its omission doesn't void the absolute validity of fulfilling the obligation. It's the difference between an A+ and a passing C.
The C is still sufficient. It's an intellectual solution that maintains the integrity of the Qur'an's general allowances while honoring the essential nature of al-Fatiha.
Oh, okay, after wading through all of that rigorous legal dissection, we can step back and just appreciate the profound wisdom and spiritual merit of al-Fatiha. It's called the opening, but it's really a comprehensive instruction manual for devotion.
It is the divine instruction on the structure of communication with the Creator. It teaches us not just what to say, but the order in which to say it. The methodology is clear. Always precede your supplication with praise and glorification.
Because that structure is the most likely to result in acceptance.
It is. And we can trace this sequential theological order perfectly through the 7 verses. It's a complete roadmap.
Can you lay that flow out for us?
Of course. The flow is meticulous. First, you have praise and exaltation. The sequence begins with pure praise for Allah, from Alhamdulillahi up to Maliki Yamal Din, establishing God's majesty first. Second, the affirmation of exclusive worship. This is immediately followed by the declaration, Iyaka Nabudu, you alone we worship, the pledge of submission.
And only after that pledge do we seek assistance.
Crucially, Wa Iyaka Nastan, and upon you alone we seek assistance. Our need for aid is predicated on our commitment to worship.
And then finally, the supplication.
Only then, in the final step, does the specific petition arrive. Idina alirad al-mustaqim. Guide us to the straight path. The request is earned by the praise and commitment that came before it.
And that supplication for guidance itself has a nuance. It's not about past deeds, is it?
Exactly. Scholars clarify it's not for guidance already received, that's manifest in your belief, but specifically for future guidance, and more critically, for firmness and steadfastness, tawfiq on the path.
A prayer to remain away from the errors of others.
Right. Now, what stands out in Al-Razi's analysis is the sheer number of names and merits given to this short surah. It's a profound encapsulation of the entire Quran.
It's called al-Kitab, the mother of the book.
And that title isn't arbitrary. It signifies that the Fatiha is the foundation, the essence, the beginning of the Quran. Much like the word mother, is used for the earth because humanity was created from its substance. It contains the essential foundation of the whole revelation.
And the other distinctive title, Al-Sab al-Mathani, the 7 oft-repeated verses. This speaks directly to its role in prayer.
It does. The sources explain the etymology. 7 is its verse count, excluding the basmala. and matani means repeated, specifically referring to the unique sunnah feature that these 7 verses are repeated in every single rak'ah of every prayer.
Which highlights its importance above all other parts of the Quran.
It does. And we can't forget its spiritual benefits, which extend far beyond ritual. It's famously a ruqya, a spiritual healing.
The story of Abu Sa'd al-Khudri.
A famous, authoritative story. When he encountered a tribe whose chief had been stung by a scorpion, he recited al-Fatiha 7 times over him, and the chief was cured.
And when they returned, the Prophet affirmed their action.
Yes, asking, how did you know that it is a true ruqya? This secures its status as a powerful, blessed source of healing and protection.
And finally, we should just briefly bring the basmala back into focus, summarizing the legal and spiritual significance that justifies this whole deep analysis.
The basmala is a miniature declaration of absolute devotion. Its functions are derived from all the legal arguments we consected. It embodies seeking blessing, glorifying God's name. It's a symbol of the religion in acts like slaughtering.
A way to repel Satan from food and actions, a refuge for the fearful.
And a declaration of complete reliance on God before you start anything.
And within those few words are the 2 most exclusive, most comprehensive divine names.
That is the ultimate concentration of spiritual power. You have Allah, the proper name of the one true deity, and Al-Rahman, the all-encompassing exclusive mercy, a quality of mercy reserved solely for the Creator. Beginning anything with that phrase is placing it under the umbrella of divine sovereignty and boundless mercy.
Wow. This deep dive into al-Razi's classical analysis has been a profound journey into the rigorous intellectual demands of Islamic jurisprudence. We move past simple answers to the deep mechanics. Understanding how the linguistic necessity of an implicit pronoun established a dual legal meaning, I begin and you begin, in the very first word. That's incredible.
And we definitively established the basmala's legal status. It is Quran, but its primary function at the start of surahs is one of separation and initiation, not inclusion.
A ruling secured by the ultimate authority in legal methodology. The failure of mass transmission, of tawatur, to establish it otherwise.
And perhaps the most crucial takeaway for any informed learner is that elegant distinction between prayer validity and prayer perfection, exemplified by that term, kidaj.
Understanding kidaj is deficiency, which presupposes existence, protect the generality of that clear Quranic command, harkwa matayasa, recite whatever is easy. It's the pinnacle of judicial harmonization.
We specifically structured this discussion to cover the entirety of this complex legal material in a thorough, academic, and professional format, honoring the depth of al-Razi's analysis while making it accessible for you.
And we saw in multiple instances that the classical legal method really prioritizes certainty over singular strength. Even sound solitary reports have to yield to the level of certainty established by Tawpur, or the consistent, unified practice of the 4 caliphs.
It shows that certainty in knowledge transmission is the paramount principle in religious law. It overrides personal interpretation or even strong but isolated pieces of evidence.
It raises a pretty interesting final thought for you to explore.
If the most recited phrase in Islam, the basmala, required centuries of juristic and linguistic argument just to secure its exact placement and legal implication, what does that tell us about the need for constant, disciplined, methodological scrutiny when we approach any revealed text? It just underscores that religious knowledge is built on systematic certainty, not on assumption.
For those of you who want to explore the full chain of narrations, the specific legal citations, and the original texts, check the link in the description for more details.
Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
Until next time.